I don't usually tell people this story, not because I think they'll laugh at me. Honestly, most people don't. They usually just get quiet. It's happened a few times now. Someone asks why I stopped delivering food, and I'll tell them I just got tired of it. That's easier than telling them the real reason. The truth is, I haven't accepted a delivery after midnight in almost 3 years, and it's all because of one order. At the time, I was working full-time in a warehouse during the day. Delivering food was just a way to make a little extra money a few nights a week. It wasn't glamorous, but it was easy. Put on a podcast, drive around for a few hours, and head home with some extra cash. Most nights were completely forgettable. I couldn't tell you where I delivered on a Tuesday or what I dropped off on a Saturday. They all blended together, except this one. It was a Friday in late October, cold enough that I had the heat on in the car, but not cold enough for snow. I'd been driving since a little after 5, and by the time the last order came in, I was already thinking about going home. I remember glancing at the clock on my dashboard. 11:34 p.m. My phone buzzed almost immediately after. 1 cheeseburger, large fries, sweet tea, total payout, $7.43. I actually laughed to myself. $7. I almost hit decline. But when I looked at the map, I noticed something. The delivery was in the same general direction as my apartment. It wasn't exactly on the way, but close enough that I figured I'd get paid to drive home. Seemed like an easy decision. I accepted the order. Looking back, I wish I'd just eaten the cancellation and gone home. The restaurant was one of those little burger places that's open late on weekends. There was one employee behind the counter and a guy wiping tables. They both looked like they wanted the night to end as much as I did. The cashier handed me the bag and smiled. Last order? I nodded. Hopefully. He laughed. Lucky you. I remember thinking the exact same thing. I carried the bag back to my car, set it on the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. If I'd known that was the last normal moment of the night, I probably would have sat there a little longer. The first 15 minutes of the drive were completely normal. I had the radio on low, the heat running, and the windshield wipers moving back and forth just fast enough to keep the rain from building up. There weren't many cars out that late. Every once in a while, another set of headlights would pass in the opposite direction, but after a few miles, even those disappeared. I remember thinking how quiet everything felt. The kind of quiet you only notice after being surrounded by noise all day. My phone was mounted on the dashboard with the GPS running. The route looked simple enough. About 25 minutes, a few turns, then a long stretch of county road before the destination. Nothing unusual. About 10 minutes into the drive, the speed limit dropped from 55 to 45. The houses started getting farther apart. Then they disappeared completely. It was just fields, patches of woods, and the road. I remember checking the GPS because it felt like I'd driven farther than I should have. The blue route was still there. Everything looked normal. Then my music stopped. Not faded out. Stopped. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see that my phone had disconnected from the car. It hadn't. The Bluetooth icon was still connected. The song was still playing, except there wasn't any sound. I turned the volume knob up. Nothing. I turned it back down. Still nothing. Then, without touching anything, the music came back, right where it had left off. I remember laughing to myself. Cheap phone. I said out loud. That was the first time I spoke during the drive, and for some reason, hearing my own voice made the car feel a little less empty. Another minute passed. Then the GPS froze. The little blue arrow stopped moving. My car kept rolling down the road, but according to the map, I wasn't moving at all. 5 seconds later, the screen refreshed. The map jumped forward. Everything caught up. Again. I didn't think much of it. Cell service isn't great once you get outside the city. I'd seen GPS apps do stranger things, but something else caught my attention. I hadn't seen another car in a while. Not behind me, not in front of me, not even coming the other direction. Just darkness, and the sound of rain hitting the roof. Then my phone buzzed. I figured it was the customer asking for extra ketchup or telling me to leave the order at the door. I looked down at the notification. It wasn't from the customer. It was the delivery app. You've arrived. I frowned. I looked out the windshield. There wasn't a house. There wasn't even a driveway. Just trees. I looked at the screen again. You've arrived. The blue pin was sitting right on top of my location. I looked out the windshield one more time. Nothing. Just trees. I remember thinking maybe the address had been pinned wrong. It happens once in a while. I reached over to grab my phone so I could check the house number manually. Before I touched the screen, the GPS refreshed. The map shifted about 50 feet. A narrow driveway appeared on the right. I swear it hadn't been there a second earlier. I slowed down and pulled onto the gravel. The headlights barely reached past the first line of trees. The driveway curved just enough that I couldn't see what was at the end. I kept telling myself there had to be a house back there. People live out in the country. It's not unusual. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I crept forward. Then the trees opened up. There was a farmhouse sitting by itself in the middle of a clearing. It wasn't abandoned. It just looked forgotten. The paint had faded years ago. One shutter hung crooked beside an upstairs window. The porch sagged slightly near the front steps. There was only one light on, a single yellow porch light. Everything else was dark. Then I noticed someone standing outside. At first I thought it was a porch post. They weren't moving. They were just standing there, waiting. My headlights finally reached the porch. It was an older man, maybe late 60s. Baseball cap, dark jacket. His hands were in his pockets. He wasn't waving. He wasn't looking around. He was looking directly at my car. I remember checking the app. It said, "Leave at door." That didn't make much sense considering he was already outside. I grabbed the bag and stepped out. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No insects, no dogs, no wind, just my footsteps on the wet gravel. As I got closer, the man smiled. It wasn't creepy, just polite. "Evening," he said. His voice sounded tired. I held out the bag. "Food delivery." He looked down at the bag for a second, then back at me. His smile disappeared. "Son," he said quietly. I didn't order any food. For a second, I thought he was joking. I looked down at the bag, then back at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded slowly. "Son, I haven't ordered takeout in years." I pulled my phone out and looked at the address again. Same house number, same road, same location. Everything matched. "Maybe somebody else here ordered it?" I asked. The old man looked back at the house before answering. "I live here alone." Something about the way he said it made me stop asking questions. He wasn't confused. He sounded certain. I apologized for bothering him and started backing toward my car. Before I reached the driveway, my phone vibrated. I assumed it was the app asking me to complete the delivery. Instead, it was a text message. There was no phone number, just the words, "Wrong house." I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "Turn around." My stomach dropped. I slowly looked back toward the farmhouse. The old man was still standing on the porch, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me, toward the trees. His expression had completely changed. "Get in your car," he said, quietly. "Now." I turned around. At first, I didn't see anything, just darkness between the trees. Then, one light. It looked like a flashlight, except it wasn't moving. It was just there. A few seconds later, another light appeared, then another. 3 white lights, perfectly still, far enough apart that they couldn't all be one person. None of them moved. None of them got brighter. They just stayed there, watching. The old man didn't take his eyes off the tree line. "Don't look at them," he said. "Just leave." I didn't argue. I turned around and ran. Somewhere between the porch and my car, I dropped the food. I didn't stop to pick it up. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed down the driveway so fast the tires spun in the gravel. I looked in the rearview mirror once. The old man was still standing on the porch. He hadn't moved. He wasn't watching me anymore. He was still staring toward the woods, like he was waiting for something. I hit the main road and didn't slow down until I saw the lights of a gas station almost 15 minutes later. That's when my phone finally had service again. The music started playing. The GPS refreshed. Everything looked normal. I sat there for a minute trying to convince myself I'd overreacted. Maybe the old man had been confused. Maybe the lights belonged to hunters. Maybe I was just exhausted. Then I opened the delivery app. The order was still active. It was waiting for me to mark it as delivered. I called support. The representative asked for the order number. I read it to her. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have an order with that number." I thought she'd typed it in wrong. I read it again. Same answer. I looked back at my phone. The customer's name was gone. The address was gone. Even the list of food had disappeared. The only thing left on the screen was the total, $7.43. Then the app refreshed. The order vanished, like it had never existed. I deleted the app a few days later. I never delivered food again. About a year after it happened, I mentioned the story to someone at work. He asked me a question nobody else had asked before. "What did the old man say right before you left?" I thought about it for a second. Then I remembered. There was one sentence I hadn't thought about in months. He never said, "Run." He never said, "You're in danger." He looked at me, glanced toward the woods, and quietly said, "Now they'll know your face." I don't know why I'd forgotten that. Maybe because I didn't understand what he meant. Maybe because I didn't want to. But sometimes, when I'm driving home late at night, I'll catch myself looking into the trees longer than I should. Not because I expect to see those lights again, but because a small part of me still wonders if something out there recognized me that night. Lock your doors, and I'll see you after dark.